So before starting with the competitive audits idea, did you also try something else, or you just right away started with competitive audits?
Yeah. So Sherlock for about a year before getting into competitive audits, Sherlock was actually we were matching teams of smart contract auditors together and kind of saying, okay, let's try to find, we were working with Chris Michel, we were working with Gerard Persson, some of these guys, and kind of putting them together and having them do audits in that model. And obviously there are some auditors who still use that model in terms of matching, some top auditors and then having them do an audit. So we used that method for about 10 months, almost a year, and it worked well and we liked it. But we did notice that there was still some things that seemed to be slipping through the cracks. And there was, logically it was like, okay, we still are only having, maybe one or two top people look at this, maybe a couple, less top people look at it. And there's just so much surface area that we still didn't feel comfortable with it. We still were kind of like, okay, we're not fully solving the problem of trying to make sure that every possible vulnerability is found before mainnet. And so that's why Sherlock started getting more interested in the contest approach. Obviously, C4 was doing it a long time before Sherlock. And I think Sherlock's protocol, I'm trying to think if it was our V1 or V2, definitely our V2 was audited by Code Arena. So we had the contests and we were one of the earlier protocols using Code Arena, and so we experienced all of the early problems, some of which potentially still exist today. Where I think we really wanted like Chris Michel to participate in our audit way back in the day and participate on Code Arena, and it just so happened that we ended up scheduling it for a week where he was like at a wedding or something and out of town. And we're like, dang, we missed the guy. Like we really wanted to look at our code. We don't really know who looked at it anymore. I mean, back in the day, there was only, a dozen or 24 people looking at your contracts. Maybe it was a little bit more than that when Sherlock was doing it, but it wasn't much more. And so we were like, man, we missed the guy. Like, how do we know that we're actually getting a good review? Who do we know actually reviewed this thing fully? And then we also had the problem of like, okay, there were, 30 people or 40 people who participated in this contest. They submitted like, 250 things or something, which was a ton back then. And Avert, my co-founder, the, Solidity guru on Sherlock's team, spent, like an entire week, like 12 hours a day for a week, trying to figure out if those submissions were real or not and trying to do the POC for them and trying to understand which ones were real and which ones weren't quite understanding the code base properly. And so, but we saw like, okay, there's a lot of submissions in here that we probably wouldn't have gotten if this was a 2-person audit or a 3-person audit. And that was really powerful, but it was unfortunate that Avert had to lose a week and basically validate everything himself, to understand if it was real. So that was kind of like us understanding.
There was no judges back then in C4?
No.
Or it was like a mutual work of like the judge and the sponsor?
I don't believe there must have been a judge because they still have to grade these submissions, so that they know who to give but it was, it might've been a bad time, but it took literally, I think 4 months. Like I think we did a January contest and the results came out in April or May. And so obviously, we weren't going to wait that long. So we had to go through all of the submissions in the very first week.